Hey everyone, today I'm going to be going over the Apcsa 2024 FRQ question one. So this question is regarding a bird feeder. We have a class that represents a bird feeder, and basically on any given day, either some birds can eat at the feeder or a bear can eat at the feeder. And they ask us to write a few methods to implement this. So I'm not going to read this line by line, but basically the gist of this simulate one day method is we want to determine if birds are eating at the feeder or a bear is eating at the feeder, and then appropriately update the um, current food attribute, which represents how much food is left at the feeder. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to just write out this feeder class, a feeder, um, and this is going to have a one attribute, current food, and it might have other methods and variables like this line here says. Actually, we'll see that it probably has at least a constructor to actually run the code. But for now, I'm just going to copy the other methods in here. And so we'll start with simulate one day, public void, simulate one day, which takes in a numbers argument. And then there's another method, simulate many days, which returns an int, public and simulate many days, which takes in a numbered and numbers and oops, numbered and a num days argument. Okay. So you can read through question one, or sorry, part A of question one in more detail. But the gist of it is there's a normal scenario and an abnormal scenario. And the normal scenario is when the birds eat, and then the abnormal scenario, which occurs 5% of the time, is when the bears eat, or the bear eats and sets the feeder. Basically, it's all the food in the feeder setting the current food attribute to be 0. So first thing we have to do is determine normal or abnormal. And the method that we can take advantage of here is the random method from the math class, which gives us a double between 0.0 and less than 1.0. So what we can do is just call this chance of, or call this double chance of normal equals math.random, like this. And basically, if this variable is less than 0.95, sorry, if chance of normal is less than 0.95, we have birds eating. Otherwise, we have bears eating. And as it says, the bears eating scenario is actually pretty straightforward. The current food, the bear will basically eat all of the food in the feeder. So yeah, so under abnormal condition, a bear empties the feeder and the amount of food in the feeder at the end of the day is 0. So we're just going to set current food to be 0. And then in the other case, we have to compute how much food is actually eaten. So this is kind of the gist of it right here. So in step 2 here, determine how much food birds eat. The birds eat. Okay. And then so basically, we'll have food eaten equals the number of birds times, oops, this should be an uppercase, times food per bird. All right. And the food per bird we can define here as a state in the question is a random integer between 10 and 50. So the gist of the question boils down to being able to generate a random integer from in the range of 10 and 50 inclusive. So working off of what we know with math.random, so math.random, so let's just start with that, math.random gives us a double in the range 0 to 1. So 1 exclusive. So that's why I use a curly brace instead of the square brace here. We can get this into a range of 41. So 0 to 41, and I'll explain in a second why I do that. So if I multiply this by 41, then all of a sudden this range is equal to 41, or sorry, 0 to 41 exclusive. So again, this is a double. This entire chunk, this expression right here returns a double in this range. Now, if I cast this to an integer, this would give me an integer between 0 and 41, 40 inclusive, but what I actually want is 10 to 50. So what I can do now is just add 10. So if I do 10 plus this range, then what I get is I get 10 to 51, like that. So again, so math.random is going to give me a range, give me 0 to 1, like that. And then multiplying it by 41 gets us into the 41, 0 to 41 range. So it's a double in this range, and then another double in this range. And then adding 10 gets us into that 10 to 51 inclusive range. So this whole expression gives us a double in this range. And then finally, when we cast it to an integer, it gives us a integer in this range 10 to 51 inclusive. So let me just put some parentheses around this whole thing. And voila. All right. So this gives us integer in the range 10 to 51, or 10 to 50 inclusive. And then, so that's the amount of food per bird. And then the total amount of food eaten is the number of birds times the food per bird. And then what we're going to do is if the food eaten or the food eaten is how much the birds want to eat. If the food eaten is less than what's available in the feeder, then we're just going to update our feeder's value to be its current value minus however much the birds are going to eat. Otherwise, we're going to say, so basically this is the case. So let's just say, so if this is the case that there's enough food in the feeder for all of the birds to eat how much food they want to eat. And then this is the case where there's not enough food in the eater, there's not enough food in the feeder. So we're just going to zero it all out. We're just going to say they're going to eat all the food, and the value of the feeder is going to be 0. All right. Okay. And then moving on to part B of the question, where we simulate many days. Basically, what it's asking is how, if we simulate 10 days or 5 days, how many of those days do the birds show up at the feeder and find some food? And birds showing up or bears showing up doesn't really matter. So what we want to do here is we want to keep a counter of the number of days, num days with food, and initialize that to 0. And then we want to loop through the number of days. So for int day equals 0, day less than num day, day less than num days, day plus plus. And then we just want to simulate one particular day. So basically the for loop is going to iterate num days. So if we have 5, if num days is 5, the for loop is going to iterate 5 times, and each day it's going to simulate 1 day by calling that method. But before we call the method, we want to make sure that we check and update our num days with food counter if there is food there. So if this dot current food is greater than 0, we want to num days with food plus plus. All right. And then we want to simulate 1 day, and we're going to pass in the number of birds as an argument to that method, just like that. And then at the end of this, we just want to return the number of days with food. Great. And then that basically completes the question. But just to show you this in action, I'm going to run this code by writing a driver class, public static void main string args, and then I'm going to create a feeder instance. So I'm going to call this f1 equals new feeder. Well, we need to define a constructor in here to actually create this class and initialize it with some current food amount. So this isn't part of the question, but this is needed to actually run these methods. So I'm just going to write a constructor in here, and then I'm going to say this current food is equal to whatever is passed in as an argument. And then I am going to pass in, let's look at how they call this here. So they're going to pass it, they want to initialize the feeder with 2,400 grams of food, and then call the 10 simulate many days with 10 birds in 4 days. So let's do that. So I'm going to say f1 dot simulate many days, and I'm going to call it 10 birds 4 days, and let's store the return value. Days with food is equal to whatever this method returns. And let's just say days with food and print this out. All right, so we get 2 days with food. Great. Let's also try this next one. Current food 250, and then simulate many days. So we're gonna simulate 5 days with 10 birds. So let's just do this. 250, 10 birds in 5 days. And because this is random, it's not necessarily true that the output that you see is going to be the same as the output that they get. But we can sort of increase, if we kind of know like what we're doing, we can sort of like guess the output. For example, if I start off with a low amount of food, let's say I just start with like 50 grams of food, and I want to send in like 50 birds, 50 birds, 50 birds for like 5 days, or actually let's do like 10 days. I should probably not get that many days with food. So let's try that. Yeah, so just like 1 day. Okay, now let's try with like 5,000 grams of food, and let's try with like just 3 birds, and let's just do like 5 days. Actually, let's do like 3 days. Yep. So basically all of the days, the birds find food at the feeder. And yeah, that is pretty much it.